The concrete mixer's roar drowns out Sarah's phone buzzing with 57 missed calls. She wipes sweat from her forehead, staring at the fresh cement where her pool used to be, when Karen's shrill voice cuts through the August heat. Where's the pool for my daughter's birthday? But Karen doesn't know about the restraining order tucked in Sarah's back pocket, or that every single parent she invited is about to discover the truth about what really happened to little Emma's accident last summer. Part 1. The last of Sarah. Martinez pressed her back against the kitchen window, watching the concrete truck lumber down Maple Street like a mechanical beast coming to devour her problems. The August sun blazed mercilessly overhead, turning the suburban neighborhood into a shimmering mirage of heat waves and desperate air conditioning units working overtime. This is it, she whispered to herself, fingers trembling as she gripped her coffee mug. No more. The pool had been David's idea, back when they were married, back when she believed his promises about family barbecues and lazy Sunday afternoons. Now, 3 years after the divorce and 18 months of hell courtesy of her neighbor Karen Whitmore, the crystal blue water that once sparkled with possibility had become a monument to her misery. Sarah's phone buzzed. Karen's name flashed. Across the screen for the 4th time in 10 minutes. Don't answer, she commanded herself. Let it ring, but Karen's persistence was legendary in the neighborhood. She'd once called the Homeowners Association 17 times in a single day to complain about Sarah's unsightly garden gnomes. The woman treated Sarah's backyard like a personal entertainment venue, complete with uninvited guests, discarded beer bottles, and the kind of entitled attitude that made Sarah's teeth ache from grinding them in her sleep. The concrete truck's diesel engine coughed to a stop in front of her house. Sarah drained her coffee and headed outside, her bare feet slapping against the sun-baked pavement. You sure about this? The burly contractor, Miguel, emerged from the cab, his hard hat already dark with sweat. It's a beautiful pool. Shame to fill it. I'm sure. Sarah's voice carried more conviction than she'd felt in months. How long will it take? 6 hours, maybe 7. We'll need to drain it first, then. Sarah. Karen's voice cut across the morning air like a rusty blade. She emerged from her pristine colonial house, her blonde hair perfectly coiffed despite the oppressive heat, wearing yoga pants that probably cost more than Sarah's monthly grocery budget. What is this truck doing here? Sarah turned slowly, summoning every ounce of composure she could muster. Good morning, Karen. Don't you good morning me. Karen's voice pitched higher, drawing the attention of Mrs. Chen, who was watering her petunias 3 houses down. What are you doing to the pool? Filling it with concrete. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Karen's face cycled through several shades of red before settling on a color Sarah privately dubbed entitled fury. You can't do that. It's my pool. On my property. But Madison's birthday party is next weekend. I already sent out invitations. 30 kids are expecting to use my pool without my permission. Sarah stepped closer, close enough to smell Karen's expensive perfume mixed with the sharp scent of desperation. Like you've been doing all summer. Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for water. That's different. You weren't using it. Because every time I tried, you'd show up with your friends, your kids, your wine, and your assumption that my backyard was your personal country club. Miguel cleared his throat diplomatically. Ladies, I need to get started if we are going to finish today. The heat's only getting worse. Sarah nodded. Do it. Sarah, please. Karen's voice cracked with genuine panic. Be reasonable. I'll pay you. How much do you want? There isn't enough money in the world, Karen. But the children should have been supervised by their parents instead of left to run wild in my yard while you gossiped and drank sangria. The memory of last month's impromptu pool party flashed through Sarah's mind. 15 adults, 23 children, and not one person who bothered to ask permission or clean up afterward. Sarah had come home from her mother's chemotherapy. Appointment to find pizza boxes floating in her pool and someone's child using her flower bed as a bathroom. Miguel's crew began unloading equipment with practiced efficiency. The sound of machinery firing up seemed to snap Karen out of her stupor. I'll call the Homeowners Association. Go ahead. I checked the bylaws. I'm well within my rights. This is insane. You're being vindictive. Sarah laughed, a sound devoid of humor. Vindictive? Karen, last week you used my pool while I was at work, broke my gate latch, left garbage everywhere, and when I texted you about it, you said I should be grateful for the free cleaning service your kids provided by peeing in my chlorinated water. That was a joke. No, Karen. A joke is funny. What you've been doing is trespassing, property damage, and harassment. The pool pump shut off with a mechanical wheeze, and Miguel's team began connecting the drainage hoses. The sight of her blue oasis about to disappear filled Sarah with an unexpected mixture of sadness and liberation. Karen pulled out her phone with shaking fingers. I'm calling everyone. The whole neighborhood will know what you're doing. Good. Maybe they'll finally understand why. As Karen speed-dialed what was probably the first number in her contact list, likely the Homeowners Association president, who happened to be her sister-in-law, Sarah noticed movement in several windows. Along the street, news traveled fast in suburbia, especially news involving Karen's dramatic voice carrying across the neighborhood like an air raid siren. Elena, it's Karen. Yes, I know it's early. Sarah Martinez is destroying her pool. She's filling it with cement. Can you believe? What do you mean good for her? Sarah suppressed a smile. Elena Rodriguez had never been a fan of Karen's entitled behavior, especially after Karen had complained about Elena's quinceañera party being too loud and ethnic for the neighborhood. Miguel approached with a clipboard. We'll start draining. Now. Should take about 90 minutes with our pumps. You sure you don't want to just fence it off instead? Seems like a waste of a good pool. Sarah watched the water level drop, revealing the ring of scum and debris that Karen's guests had left behind despite claiming to be such good neighbors. I'm sure. Karen ended her call with Elena and immediately started another. Sarah recognized the pattern. Karen would work her way through every contact, every potential ally, building her case and rallying support like a general preparing for war. Tom. Karen Whitmore. I need your help. The morning stretched on, punctuated by the industrial hum of drainage pumps and Karen's increasingly frantic phone calls. By the third call, Sarah realized Karen was telling people that Sarah had lost her mind, that she was destroying perfectly good property out of spite, that her poor daughter Madison would be heartbroken. What Karen wasn't mentioning was the broken sprinkler head from when her nephew decided to practice skateboard tricks on Sarah's irrigation system, or the trampled garden where Karen's friends had set up an unauthorized volleyball net, or the afternoon Sarah had come home to find Karen in her kitchen, helping herself to drinks from Sarah's refrigerator because the door was unlocked. Mrs. Martinez. Miguel wiped his forehead with a bandana. Water's almost out. You might want to go inside. Things are about to get loud. Sarah nodded, but as she turned toward her house, a familiar silver BMW pulled into Karen's driveway. Sarah's stomach dropped as she recognized the driver, Janet Morrison, president of the Pine Valley Homeowners Association and Karen's sister-in-law. Janet emerged from her car wearing the kind of power suit that screamed I have lawyers on speed dial and marched directly towards Sarah's property line. Sarah Martinez. Janet's voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. I'm ordering you to stop this immediately. You can't order me to do anything on my own property, Janet. The Homeowners Association has covenants about property modifications. That could affect neighborhood values. Miguel looked up from his equipment, clearly uncomfortable with the escalating confrontation. His crew continued working, but Sarah could see them exchanging glances. I read the covenants, Sarah replied, calmly. Swimming pool removal doesn't require approval. But filling it with concrete is a permanent modification that I have every legal right to make. Sarah pulled a folder from her back pocket. I also had a survey done. Karen's been using my pool without permission, which constitutes trespassing. Her guests have caused property damage. And this morning, she threatened to call everyone to harass me about my personal property decisions. Janet's confident expression wavered slightly. Now see here. No, you see here. Sarah's voice hardened. I've documented everything. Every unauthorized pool party, every piece of broken property, every entitled demand. I've been patient, I've been reasonable, and I've been ignored. So now I'm taking action. Karen appeared. At Janet's shoulder, her face flushed with heat and indignation. Tell her, Janet. Tell her she can't do this. Actually, Miguel interrupted politely, we need everyone to step back. We're about to start the concrete pour, and for safety reasons, safety. Karen shrieked. The only safety concern here is my daughter's emotional well-being when she finds out her pool party is ruined. The words hung in the morning air like a confession. Rebecca Chen's law office smelled like leather and justice, with just a hint of the expensive coffee that fueled late-night case preparations. Sarah sat across from Rebecca's mahogany desk, watching her lawyer arrange printed screenshots into neat piles with the methodical precision of a surgeon preparing for a complex operation. 67 threatening phone calls, 112 abusive text messages, 14 voicemails containing profanity and threats, and 3 instances of people driving by your house to take pictures. Rebecca's voice carried the satisfaction of someone who'd been handed a perfect case. Karen Whitmore has given us enough evidence to bury her in civil court and potentially send her to jail. Sarah's phone had finally stopped buzzing an hour ago, after Rebecca's cease and desist letter had been hand-delivered to Karen's front door by a process server who looked like he bench-pressed motorcycles for fun. The sudden silence felt almost unnatural after 3 days of constant harassment. What happens now? Sarah asked. Now we wait to see if Karen is smart enough to stay quiet, or stupid enough to keep making our case stronger. Rebecca leaned back in her chair, her steel-grey hair catching the afternoon light. But knowing what you've told me about her personality, I'm betting on stupid. As if summoned by their conversation, Sarah's phone rang. The caller ID showed Janet Morrison's number. Answer it, Rebecca instructed, activating her recording app. Let's see what the family has to say now. Sarah put the call on speaker. Hello, Janet. Sarah, thank God. Listen, we need to talk. Karen is. She's having a bit of a breakdown. She's locked herself in her bathroom and won't come out. Tom's threatening to file for divorce, and Madison keeps asking why all the parents are calling her mommy names. Sarah felt a flicker of something that might have been sympathy, but Rebecca's sharp look reminded her to stay focused. What does that have to do with me, Janet? She's sorry. She's really, really sorry. She never meant for it to get this bad. Janet, your sister-in-law organized a harassment campaign against me because I wouldn't let her use my pool without permission. She told dozens of strangers that I was mentally unstable and cruel, and gave them my personal information so they could call and threaten me. Being sorry doesn't undo that. But she's learned her lesson. She'll never bother you again. Rebecca leaned forward and spoke into the phone. Ms. Morrison, this is Rebecca Chen, Sarah's attorney. Has your sister-in-law issued the public retraction we demanded? A long pause. Well, no. She says that would make her look bad. She says what? Sarah's voice rose in disbelief. She's worried about her reputation in the neighborhood. If she admits she was lying about you, people will think she's a bad person. Rebecca and Sarah exchanged a look that could have melted steel. Janet, Rebecca's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. Your sister-in-law is facing potential criminal charges for harassment, defamation, and cyberstalking. Her reputation should be the least of her concerns right now. But surely you can work something out. The time for working things out ended when she decided to turn my client into a target for public harassment. Karen had multiple opportunities to handle this like an adult. Instead, she chose to weaponize other people's emotions and paint my client as a monster for exercising basic property rights. Sarah's doorbell rang in the distance. She could hear it through her phone's microphone, creating an odd echo effect. Janet, I have to go. Someone's at my door. Sarah, please don't do anything rash. Sarah hung up and looked at Rebecca. Should I answer it? Absolutely. If it's more harassment, we are documenting it. If it's Karen trying to apologize, we need that on record too. They drove to Sarah's house in Rebecca's pristine silver Lexus, arriving to find a scene that looked like something from a disaster movie. Karen's BMW was parked sideways across Sarah's driveway, the driver's door hanging open as if she'd abandoned it in a panic. Karen herself was sitting on Sarah's front porch steps, her perfectly styled hair hanging in limp strands around her face, yesterday's makeup smeared into raccoon circles around her red-rimmed eyes. Oh, this is perfect, Rebecca murmured, pulling out her phone to start recording. Nothing says rational behavior like trespassing on someone's property after you've been served with a cease and desist order. Karen looked up as they approached, and Sarah was shocked by the transformation. The confident, entitled woman who demanded access to Sarah's pool 3 days ago had been replaced by something hollow and desperate. Sarah, please, Karen's voice was hoarse from crying. I need to talk to you. Karen, you're trespassing on my property after being served with legal papers ordering you to stay away from me. Sarah kept her voice calm and professional. You need to leave. Now. But I can explain. The time for explanations was before you told 30 parents that I was mentally unstable. Before you gave strangers my phone number so they could call me a psycho bitch. Before you organized a harassment campaign because I wouldn't let you use my pool without permission. Karen flinched at each word as if they were physical blows. I was panicked. Madison was so excited about her party, and when I saw the concrete truck, I lost my mind. So you decided I should lose mine too. I never meant for people to call you names. I just told them what happened. Rebecca stepped forward, still recording. Ms. Whitmore, what exactly did you tell people happened? Karen's eyes darted between Sarah and Rebecca like a trapped animal looking for an escape route. I said that Sarah was filling her pool to spite me, that she was doing it to hurt Madison. And was that true? Well, no. But, so you lied about Sarah's motivations. I was upset. Did you tell people that Sarah had given permission for your daughter's party? Karen's silence stretched long enough to answer the question. Did you tell people that you had been using Sarah's pool without permission for months? That's not. It's more complicated than, it's a yes or no question, Ms. Whitmore. Did you tell the people you called that you had been trespassing on Sarah's property? No. The word came out as barely a whisper. So you gave people false information about the situation, then provided them with Sarah's personal contact information so they could harass her based on those lies. Karen buried her face in her hands. I just wanted them to convince her to wait a few more days. By calling her a psycho. By threatening her. By telling her she should be ashamed of herself for exercising her property rights. I didn't tell them to say those things. Rebecca's smile was sharp enough to cut diamonds. Ms. Whitmore, when you call 30 people and tell them that your neighbor is cruelly destroying a little girl's birthday party out of spite, what exactly did you think they were going to say to her? Sarah watched Karen crumble under Rebecca's methodical questioning and felt no satisfaction, only a bone-deep weariness. This woman had turned her life into a nightmare for 18 months, and now she was falling apart because someone had finally said no. Karen, Sarah said quietly, you need to leave my property, and you need to issue the public retraction my lawyer demanded. But people will think I'm a liar. You are a liar, Rebecca pointed out with devastating simplicity. You lied about Sarah's motivations, you lied about having permission to use her pool, and you lied about being the victim in this situation. The only question now is whether you're going to start telling the truth voluntarily, or whether a judge is going to force you to do it in court. Karen looked up at Sarah with mascara-streaked desperation. What if I pay for everything? The pool, the damages, whatever you want. Karen, you can't unbuy a harassment campaign. You can't pay me enough money to undo the 67 strangers who called me a psychotic bitch because you fed them lies about what happened. But I can make it right. How? By calling all those people back and admitting you lied. By facing the consequences of your actions instead of expecting me to absorb them. Karen's face went pale. I can't do that. My reputation, your reputation. Sarah's voice rose to a shout that echoed across the quiet neighborhood. Your reputation? Karen, you destroyed my peace of mind for 18 months. You treated my property like your personal playground. You broke into my house. You caused thousands of dollars in damage. You organized a mob to harass me. And you're worried about your reputation. I never broke into your house. Sarah pulled out her phone and scrolled to a video she'd never shown anyone. Security camera footage from July 15th. You're in my kitchen, drinking from my orange juice carton, after entering through my unlocked back door without permission. Karen watched herself on the small screen, her face cycling through denial, recognition, and finally defeat. I was thirsty. That was breaking and entering, Rebecca corrected. Which, combined with the harassment campaign, gives us enough evidence for criminal charges in addition to civil damages. A black sedan pulled up behind Karen's abandoned BMW, and Sarah recognized the driver immediately. Tom Whitmore, Karen's husband, looking like a man who'd aged 10 years in. 3 days. He emerged from his car with the slow, deliberate movements of someone trying very hard to maintain control. Karen. His voice carried the kind of quiet authority that made everyone present turn to look at him. Get in the car. Tom, I'm trying. To fix this. You're making it worse. You are violating the cease and desist. The Pine Valley Police Department's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like angry wasps as Detective Maria Santos reviewed the threatening text message on Sarah's phone. Her weathered hands moved with practiced efficiency, photographing the screen. From multiple angles while her partner, Detective James Wright, took notes in a composition book that had seen better decades. Anonymous number, routed through a VoIP service, Detective Santos murmured, more to herself than to Sarah and Rebecca. Could be from anywhere, sent by anyone. But the timing is interesting. How so? Rebecca asked, her lawyer instincts already. Calculating angles. Text was sent 47 minutes after Karen Whitmore left your property. Either someone was watching the confrontation, or Karen called them immediately afterward. Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the station's aggressive air conditioning. You think Karen has accomplices? I think entitled people don't operate in a vacuum, Detective Santos replied grimly. They build networks of enablers, supporters, and people who benefit from their behavior. When one Karen goes down, sometimes the whole hive gets angry. Detective Wright looked up from his notes. Ms. Martinez, during the 18 months of harassment, did you notice any patterns? Other neighbors who always seemed to support Karen's position. Friends who participated in the unauthorized pool parties. Sarah closed her eyes, mentally reviewing 18 months of neighborhood politics. Janet Morrison, obviously, that's Karen's sister-in-law and the HOA president. But there were others. Melissa Chen from 2 streets over. She was always at the pool parties. Brad and Susan Hartwell from the corner house. They all acted like Karen's behavior was perfectly normal. Anyone ever threaten you directly before this? Not threaten, exactly. But last month, when I complained about the broken sprinkler heads, Melissa told me I was being unnecessarily dramatic and that I should be grateful people wanted to socialize in my backyard. Rebecca leaned forward. Detective, what exactly are we dealing with here? Is this a single unhinged individual or something more organized? Detective Santos exchanged a look with her partner that Sarah didn't like at all. Ms. Chen, in my 15 years working suburban neighborhoods, I've seen this pattern before. Entitled individuals don't just randomly develop their behavior. They are enabled by social groups that benefit from or approve of their actions. When someone finally stands up to the ringleader, the whole network sometimes mobilizes. Mobilizes how? Escalation. If public shaming and harassment don't work, they move to intimidation. If intimidation doesn't work. Detective Santos didn't finish the sentence, but her implication hung in the air like smoke. Sarah's phone buzzed. Another unknown number. Don't answer it, Detective Wright instructed. Let it go to voicemail. We want to see what they're willing to say when they think you're not listening. The phone stopped ringing, then immediately started again. Different number. Then again. And again. Jesus, Rebecca muttered, watching the phone light up with call after call from numbers Sarah didn't recognize. It's like they're coordinating this. Detective Santos grabbed her radio. Dispatch, this is Santos. I need a trace on multiple harassment calls to. She looked at Sarah. What's your number? Sarah rattled off her digits, watching in growing horror as her phone continued to ring with mechanical persistence. Detective Wright said gently. Is there somewhere else you can stay tonight? Family, friends. You think I'm in danger? I think someone is very angry that their harassment campaign failed, and they're escalating rapidly. Coordinated. Phone harassment like this usually precedes more direct action. Sarah felt the world tilt slightly. 3 days ago, her biggest problem was an entitled neighbor who used her pool without permission. Now she was sitting in a police station, being advised to flee her own home because someone wanted to punish her for enforcing boundaries. This is insane, she whispered. This is what happens when enablers lose their favorite target, Detective Santos corrected. Karen was probably the tip of the iceberg. Now that she's facing consequences, her supporters are trying to restore the status quo through intimidation. Rebecca's phone rang. She glanced at the caller ID and frowned. It's my office. I need to take this. She stepped away, her voice dropping to urgent whispers that Sarah couldn't quite make out. Detective Wright's radio crackled to life. All units, we have a report of suspicious activity at 847 Maple Street. Anonymous caller reports possible drug activity. Sarah's blood went cold. That's my address. Dispatch. Detective Santos keyed her radio immediately. This is Santos. Cancel that call. We have confirmed harassment in progress. That address is involved in an active investigation. Copy. Detective. Cancelling units. They called in a fake drug report. Sarah's voice rose an octave. On my house. Classic. Escalation technique, Detective Wright explained grimly. If they can't scare you directly, they try to get law enforcement to do it for them. Anonymous tip about drugs, suspicious activity, whatever might get officers to show up at your door with guns drawn. Rebecca returned, her face pale. Sarah, we have a problem. Someone just called my office claiming to be you, saying you want to drop all charges against Karen because you're suffering from a mental breakdown. What? My secretary almost bought it. She said the caller knew details about the case that only you should know. Detective Santos leaned back in her chair, her expression darkening. Ladies, what we are dealing with here isn't random harassment. This is organized, coordinated, and sophisticated. Someone is pulling out every trick in the book to discredit you and derail the legal case. Sarah's phone had finally stopped ringing, but now it buzzed with a steady stream of text messages. Drop the charges or this gets worse. You think calling the police will help? We know where you work. Mental health evaluation might be in your future if you keep this up. Your neighbors are talking. They think you're unstable. Screenshot everything, Rebecca instructed, her lawyer brain shifting into crisis mode. We need documentation of every threat, every attempt at intimidation. Detective Santos stood up. Ms. Martinez, I'm going to be blunt. You're being targeted by what appears to be an organized campaign designed to force you to drop charges against Karen Whitmore. This isn't random neighborhood drama anymore. This is systematic intimidation. But why? It's just a pull. It's just a harassment case. Why would people go this far? Because, Detective Wright said quietly, Karen probably isn't the only one with secrets to hide. The room fell silent except for the buzz of fluorescent lights and the distant sound of radio chatter. What do you mean? Sarah asked. Think about it. 18 months of unauthorized pool parties. Multiple neighbors participating. No one ever questioning whether they had permission. Either they're all incredibly naive, or they knew exactly what they were doing and didn't care. Detective Santos nodded grimly. And if they knew they were trespassing but continued anyway, they're all potentially liable for damages. Your civil suit against Karen could expose the entire network to legal consequences. Rebecca's eyes lit up with the kind of predatory gleam that Sarah had learned to associate with legal victory, which means they have a vested interest in making sure Karen's case goes away quietly. Exactly. If Karen gets convicted of harassment and defamation, every single person who participated in those pool parties could face civil liability for trespassing and property damage. Sarah felt pieces of a puzzle clicking into place. That's why Melissa was so dismissive when I complained. That's why Janet tried so hard to get me to compromise. They weren't just enabling Karen, they were protecting themselves. Her phone buzzed with another message. Last warning. Drop the charges. You have 24 hours. Detective Santos read the message and immediately keyed her radio. Dispatch, I need units for protective surveillance at 847 Maple Street. We have credible threats against a witness in an active case. Detective, Rebecca interrupted. What are the chances this network has been operating elsewhere? Other neighborhoods, other victims? Hi. This level of organization doesn't develop overnight. Karen and her friends have probably been pulling this same routine for years, counting on victims to back down rather than face escalating harassment. Sarah's mind reeled. You think there are other people they've done this to? I think, Detective, Santos said carefully, that we should pull complaints against any of the names you've mentioned. See if there's a pattern of harassment, property disputes, or intimidation tactics. Detective Wright was already typing on his computer. Melissa Chen, 3 complaints in the last 5 years. Harassment of neighbors over property issues, noise. Complaints, 1 allegation of trespassing that was dropped when the victim moved away. Brad and Susan Hartwell. 6 complaints. Pattern of intimidation against neighbors who complained about their parties. 1 victim filed a restraining order that was mysteriously dropped 2 weeks later. Janet Morrison. As HOA president, she's been named in 4 different lawsuits, all involving harassment of homeowners who refused to comply with her suggestions. Sarah stared at the screen in horror. They are serial harassers. They are neighborhood mafia, Rebecca corrected. They identify targets, escalate pressure until the target gives in or moves away, and then move on to the next victim. The Pine Valley Community Center had never felt more like a courtroom than it did at 7:58 p.m. on a Tuesday evening in August. Sarah sat in the back row, flanked by Detective Santos in civilian clothes and Rebecca Chen, who looked like she was preparing for the trial of the century. Across the room, Janet Morrison stood at a makeshift podium, shuffling papers with the nervous energy of someone whose carefully constructed world was about to collapse. The meeting had been advertised as a neighborhood discussion about recent events, but the atmosphere felt more like a lynch mob gathering. 43 residents had shown up, the largest turnout in Pine Valley HOA history, and Sarah could feel their collective hostility like heat radiating from a furnace. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," Janet began, her voice artificially bright despite the circumstances. "As you know, recent events in our community have created some tensions that need to be addressed." Sarah noticed Janet's careful word choice. No mention of harassment. No acknowledgement of criminal behavior. Just tensions that somehow materialized out of thin air. "Before we begin," Rebecca stood up, her voice cutting through the room like a blade. "I want everyone to understand that this meeting is being recorded for legal purposes. Any statements made here tonight may be used as evidence in ongoing criminal and civil proceedings." The room erupted in angry murmurs. Several people looked like they wanted to leave, but Janet quickly regained control. "That's exactly the kind of legal intimidation we are here to discuss," Janet said, shooting a venomous look at Sarah. "One neighbor's refusal to compromise has turned our peaceful community into a battlefield." Compromise. Sarah stood up slowly, her voice carrying clearly through the suddenly silent room. "Janet, let's be very clear about what you mean by compromise. You mean I should have continued allowing Karen to trespass on my property, cause damage, and treat my backyard like her personal entertainment venue while I absorbed the costs and inconvenience. You never tried to work things out reasonably. I asked Karen to stop at least 15 times over 18 months. I offered to discuss scheduled use. I suggested she get her own pool. I even offered to help her find public venues for her parties. She ignored every attempt at reasonable resolution." Melissa Chen stood up from the third row, her face flushed with indignation. "Sarah, you're making this sound like we are criminals. We were just using a pool that was sitting empty, without permission, on someone else's property, while causing damage and refusing to clean up. What would you call that, Melissa?" "Neighborly sharing." Rebecca leaned forward. "Ms. Chen, would you be comfortable with strangers entering your property without permission and using your amenities?" "That's different." "How?" Melissa opened and closed her mouth like a fish gasping for air. The question hung in the silence, until Brad Hartwell decided to try a different approach. "Look, Sarah, nobody's saying what Karen did was perfect. But calling the police? Getting lawyers involved? That's not how neighbors handle disputes." Detective Santos shifted slightly in her seat, a movement that Sarah had learned meant she was preparing to spring into action. "Brad," Sarah replied calmly, "how exactly should neighbors handle 18 months of trespassing, property damage, and harassment? Because I tried talking. I tried reasoning. I tried being patient. The only thing that finally worked was legal action. You could have been more understanding about Madison's birthday party." The comment came from somewhere in the middle of the room, and Sarah felt her carefully maintained composure crack. "Understanding." Her voice rose to carry throughout the room. "About a party that was planned without my permission on my property? About Karen telling 30 families they could use my pool without ever asking me? About being expected to provide free entertainment while being called antisocial for objecting?" Janet banged a gavel on her makeshift podium. This kind of hostile attitude is exactly why we need community intervention. Community intervention. Rebecca stood up, her lawyer instincts fully engaged. Ms. Morrison, are you suggesting that this community has the right to override individual property rights? I'm suggesting that one person's selfishness shouldn't be allowed to destroy neighborhood harmony. And I'm suggesting, Detective Santos rose from her seat, finally revealing her identity, that neighborhood harmony built on violating other people's rights isn't harmony at all, it's organized bullying. The room exploded into chaos. People were shouting, pointing, demanding to know why police were present. Janet was banging her gavel and calling for order. But Sarah barely heard any of it, because she was staring at something that made her blood run cold. Karen Whitmore had just walked in. Despite her husband's assurances that she was locked in the bedroom, despite the restraining order, despite everything that had happened, Karen was standing in the doorway like she owned the place. Her hair was perfectly styled, her makeup flawless, and she was wearing the kind of smile that Sarah had learned to associate with incoming disaster. Detective Santos saw Karen at the same moment and immediately keyed her radio. All units, we have a violation of a restraining order at the Pine Valley Community Center. Suspect is present despite court orders. But Karen wasn't alone. Behind her stood 3 people Sarah had never seen before, 2 men and a woman, all wearing the kind of expensive casual clothes that screamed lawyer or private investigator. Ladies and gentlemen, Karen's voice cut through the chaos with practiced authority. I apologize for being late to my own intervention. Her own intervention. The words sent chills down Sarah's spine. Janet looked as shocked as everyone else. Karen, you're not supposed to be here. The legal papers have been resolved, Karen interrupted smoothly. My legal team has filed for an emergency injunction against the harassment charges, claiming prosecutorial misconduct and mental health concerns about the alleged victim. Rebecca was on her feet immediately. That's impossible. There's no basis for. Ms. Chen, one of Karen's companions, stepped forward, pulling out a business card. I'm David Kellerman, psychiatric evaluator. I've been retained to assess Ms. Martinez's mental state in light of concerning reports about her recent behavior. Sarah felt the world tilt sideways. My mental state. Destroying property out of spite, making false accusations against neighbors, exhibiting paranoid behavior. Dr. Kellerman consulted a tablet. Multiple witnesses have reported erratic behavior consistent with a stress-induced psychological break. Detective Santos stepped between the psychiatrist and Sarah. Doctor, Ms. Martinez is under police protection due to credible threats. Any evaluation would need to be court-ordered and conducted through proper channels. Actually, the second man produced his own credentials. I'm Officer Michael Torres, Pine Valley PD. I'm here to escort Ms. Martinez for a mandatory psychiatric evaluation under Section 5150. Sarah's knees went weak. A 5150 hold, involuntary psychiatric commitment based on being a danger to herself or others. If they could make it stick, even temporarily, it would destroy her credibility and give Karen everything she wanted. But Detective Santos was already shaking her head. Officer Torres, you're out of jurisdiction and have no authority here. I'm Detective Santos, and Ms. Martinez is under my protection in an active criminal investigation. Your investigation is based on false accusations by a mentally unstable individual. My investigation is based on documented harassment, criminal threats, and property damage that occurred in full view of witnesses and security cameras. Rebecca was frantically typing on her phone. This is completely improper. You can't just show up with a psychiatrist and try to have someone committed because they filed criminal charges. But Karen was smiling the kind of smile that made Sarah realize this had all been planned. The meeting, the timing, even Sarah's decision to attend, it had all been anticipated and prepared for. Sarah, Karen's voice was honey-sweet and absolutely terrifying. I know you're upset about the pool situation, but this has gone too far. You're obviously not thinking clearly, and you need help. The only thing I need help with is getting you and your friends to face the consequences of your actions. See. Karen gestured to the room full of neighbors. Paranoid accusations. Inability to accept responsibility for antisocial behavior. Classic signs of a psychological break. The psychiatric evaluator nodded gravely. Ms. Martinez, I'm legally obligated to assess individuals who may pose a danger to themselves or their community. Your recent behavior, destroying valuable property, making false accusations, refusing reasonable compromises, suggests you need professional evaluation. Sarah looked around the room and realized with crystal clarity what was happening. This wasn't a community meeting. It wasn't even a confrontation. It was a carefully orchestrated ambush designed to discredit her so completely that no one would ever believe her accusations against Karen's network. They'd probably been planning it since the moment Tom Whitmore announced he was filing for divorce. Use his absence, Karen's supposed breakdown, and Sarah's decision to fight back as evidence that she was the unstable one. Paint her as a vindictive neighbor who'd lost touch with reality, while positioning Karen as a victim of Sarah's delusions. 3 weeks later, Sarah Martinez stood in her backyard at 6:47 a.m., coffee mug in hand, watching the sunrise paint her newly planted vegetable garden in shades of gold and amber. Tomato seedlings reached toward the morning light where her pool used to be, and for the first time in over a year, the sight of her own backyard filled her with peace instead of dread. Karen Whitmore was in county jail awaiting trial on 14 felony charges. Her network of enablers had scattered like roaches when the lights came on. Janet Morrison had resigned from the HOA and put her house up for sale. Melissa Chen was facing her own harassment charges, and the fake psychiatrist Dr. Kellerman was being investigated by the State Medical Board for fraud. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca. DA called. Karen's plea hearing is today at 2 p.m. Want to be there? Sarah typed back, wouldn't miss it. She was about to head inside when she noticed something that made her blood freeze. There, pressed against her back gate, was a manila envelope with her name written in block letters across the front. No postmark. No delivery service sticker. Someone had placed it there by hand. Sarah's first instinct was to call Detective Santos, but something made her pause. The envelope was thin, probably containing just a single sheet of paper. And after everything she'd been through, after facing down fake cops and organized intimidation campaigns, she was no longer the woman who ran from confrontation. She opened the envelope. Inside was a single photograph and a handwritten note. The photograph showed Sarah's mother's house, the small ranch where her mom was recovering from chemotherapy, 60 miles away in a different city. Someone had taken the picture from across the street, close enough to capture the house number, the license plate of her mother's car, even the medical equipment delivery van in the driveway. The note was brief. Your mother looks fragile. It would be a shame if something happened while you're busy playing victim. Drop all charges by noon, or find out what real consequences look like. Sarah's hand shook as she read the words again. Karen was in jail. The network was scattered. But someone with access to Karen's information, someone willing to threaten a cancer patient, was still out there. She speed-dialed Detective Santos. Detective, it's Sarah Martinez. Someone left a package at my house. They're threatening my mother. Don't touch anything else. I'm on my way. 15 minutes later, Sarah's backyard was once again filled with police officers, but this time she felt no satisfaction watching them work. Someone had just turned her worst nightmare into reality by targeting the one person she couldn't protect. Detective Santos examined the photograph through an evidence bag, her expression grim. Professional quality camera, taken from a public street. Whoever did this knows how to stay just inside the legal boundaries while making their point crystal clear. But Karen's in jail. How could she? Karen's been making phone calls. Lots of them. And county jail calls are recorded, so we know exactly who she's been talking to. Rebecca arrived just as the crime scene team finished processing the envelope. She took one look at Sarah's face and immediately shifted into crisis mode. What are we dealing with? Detective Santos handed her the evidence bag. Escalation to threats against family members. This moves us into federal territory, interstate intimidation, possible conspiracy charges. Who's Karen been calling? That's where it gets interesting. 3 calls to her sister in Phoenix, 2 calls to her cousin in Denver, and 17 calls to a number registered to someone named Marcus Webb. Sarah frowned. I've never heard that name. Neither had we, until we ran his background. Marcus Webb is Karen's ex-boyfriend from college. He's also a private investigator with a history of aggressive tactics on behalf of wealthy clients. The pieces clicked into place with horrible clarity. She hired someone to threaten my mother. She hired someone to finish what she started. Detective Santos corrected. Webb specializes in pressure campaigns against people involved in lawsuits. His usual tactics include surveillance, intimidation, and escalating threats until targets drop their cases. Rebecca was already on her phone. I'm calling the FBI. Interstate threats, conspiracy to intimidate a witness. This is way beyond. Local jurisdiction now. Sarah stared at the photograph of her mother's house, feeling fury and fear war for control of her emotions. Detective, how quickly can we get protection for my mother? Already in progress. Local PD is sending a unit to her house, and we are coordinating with Phoenix Field Office for surveillance on Karen's sister. But what if, Sarah? Detective Santos's voice carried the authority of someone who'd handled thousands of crisis situations. Your mother is going to be fine, but we need to talk about what happens next. What do you mean? I mean Karen and her hired thug just made the biggest mistake of their lives. They've escalated from local harassment to federal crimes. But more importantly, they've given us the perfect opportunity to end this permanently. Rebecca closed her phone and turned to the group with the kind of smile that made defense attorneys wake up in cold sweats. The FBI is very interested in Mr. Marcus Webb. Turns out he's been running similar intimidation campaigns in 4 different states. Sarah's case could be the key to bringing down an entire network of witness intimidation specialists. So what's the plan? Detective Santos pulled out her notebook. First, we make sure your mother is safe. Second, we use Karen's own phone. Calls against her to prove conspiracy. Third, we let Webb make his next move while we watch and record everything. You want to use me as bait. I want to give Karen and her hired gun enough rope to hang themselves. Right now, we have harassment and intimidation. But if Webb actually attempts to carry out his threats, we have federal crimes that carry decades in prison. Sarah looked at the photograph again, at her mother's house captured in stark detail by someone who'd been paid to terrorize her family. What would I have to do? Nothing. Just go about your normal routine while we monitor all communications and maintain surveillance. If Webb makes contact, we'll be ready. If he escalates to actual threats of violence, we'll have him in handcuffs before he knows what hit him. Rebecca leaned forward. Sarah, you don't have to do this. We have enough evidence to prosecute Karen and her network without using you as bait for her hired intimidator. Sarah thought about 18 months of harassment, about unauthorized pool parties and broken property and entitled assumptions that her boundaries didn't matter, about fake cops and psychiatrists and community meetings designed to gaslight her into submission, about her mother, recovering from cancer, now targeted because someone couldn't accept consequences for their actions. I'm tired of running, she said quietly. I'm tired of being afraid. And I'm really tired of bullies thinking they can intimidate people into submission. Sarah, no, Rebecca. Karen started this because she couldn't respect basic property rights. She escalated it because she couldn't handle being told no. And now she's threatening my cancer patient mother because she can't accept responsibility for her actions. I'm done being reasonable with unreasonable people. Detective Santos studied Sarah's face with the kind of intensity that came from years of reading people in crisis situations. Ms. Martinez, if you agree to this, there's no backing out. Webb is a professional intimidator with a history of violence. Even with surveillance and protection, there are risks. There are risks to backing down too. If I drop the charges now, what message does that send? That threatening someone's family is an effective tactic? That bullies win if they just escalate far enough. Sarah's phone rang. Unknown number. Detective Santos nodded. Answer it. We are recording. Hello. Ms. Martinez. The voice was pleasant, professional, completely unthreatening. This is Marcus Webb. I believe you received my message this morning. I did. Then you understand the situation. You have until noon to contact the district attorney's office and withdraw all charges against my client. In exchange, your mother will remain safe and undisturbed. And if I don't, then you'll discover that cancer patients are particularly vulnerable to stress, accidents, and unexpected complications. It would be tragic if your vindictive lawsuit caused your mother additional health problems. The casual way he threatened a cancer patient made Sarah's vision go red around the edges. She looked at Detective Santos, who was frantically taking notes while recording the call. "Mr. Webb, are you threatening my mother?" "I'm explaining the natural consequences of your choices. Your mother's well-being is entirely in your hands." "I see. And after I drop the charges, what guarantee do I have that you won't continue threatening my family?" "You have my word as a professional. Complete the terms of our agreement, and you'll never hear from me again." Sarah looked around at the faces surrounding her, Detective Santos, who was already coordinating with federal agents, Rebecca, who was preparing what would probably be the most satisfying prosecution of her career, and the crime scene technicians, who were documenting evidence that would put Karen and her network away for decades.